It started with a registered letter I was never supposed to see, and it ended with my half-sister standing knee-deep in lake water, scrubbing the hull of a rental rowboat. She was wearing chest waders that I had custom printed with the words "hooked my inheritance" across the back. Every single cabin receipt at my fishing retreat now prints the county deed fraud docket number at the bottom. But to understand how she ended up in those waders, you need to understand the exact mechanics of how she tried to erase me. My name is Dana Holloway. For 24 years, 3 months, and 11 days, I was the daughter who stayed. My father, Arthur Holloway, was a master carpenter with a union card and a set of chisels he kept sharp enough to shave with. He built that lakefront cottage by himself over 3 summers, using cedar shingles, hand-cut oak beams, and salvaged stone from an old barn foundation. When his body started failing him at 61, I was 29. I stayed. I managed the medication schedules, the insurance appeals, the late-night hospital runs, the physical therapy visits, the wound care, and the endless phone calls with Medicare. I learned how to shim a door, sweat a copper pipe, and stretch a fixed income so far it practically snapped. My half-sister Renee was 7 years older and had a different mother. She left for a corporate marketing job in Phoenix the year our dad first got sick. She visited twice in 2 decades, once for a wedding and once for a funeral. Her husband Marcus was the kind of man who wore cufflinks to a barbecue and used the word synergy in casual conversation. They were the ones who would sweep in at the end because that is what vultures do. They circle, they wait, they manage. My father passed away on a Tuesday morning in early spring. He died in his own bed in the lakefront cottage he built with his own hands, looking out at the water he loved. It was peaceful. I was holding his hand. He squeezed my fingers once, looked at the door, and said, "Keep the hinges oiled." Then he was gone. I didn't understand the meaning of that sentence for another 10 days. The cottage itself was worth about $450,000 because of the lakefront access. The land was the value. The house was modest, 3 bedrooms, a stone fireplace, a dock that jutted out into the cove. The will was straightforward, and I heard it read aloud 4 days after the funeral, in a small conference room at a law office that smelled like old books and coffee. The estate attorney, a man named Gerald who had known my father for 30 years, cleared his throat and read the relevant clause. I received a life estate in the cottage, meaning I had the legal right to live there, use it, enjoy it, and maintain it for the rest of my natural life. Upon my death, the remainder interest would pass to Renee. It was a classic estate planning structure designed to protect a caregiver child from being displaced by a sibling who had not been present. I was never going to own it outright. I was never going to be rich, but I was never going to be homeless. That was the plan. Renee got the rest of the financial accounts, the tiny IRA, the old truck. The life estate was my shield, and I was supposed to be safe inside it. Renee and Marcus did not come to the will reading. They sent a faxed letter from Marcus's office requesting a copy of the will and all pertinent filings. A week later, they flew in from Phoenix, booked a suite at a 4-star hotel 20 minutes away, and descended on the cottage like a corporate acquisition team. Renee did not cry. She did not ask me how I was doing. She walked through the house with her phone out, videoing the rooms, tapping the walls, testing the windows, and narrating the footage like she was shooting a property listing for a reality show. Marcus stood on the dock and made phone calls, talking in that low, fake, confidential tone that men use when they are trying to convince someone they are important. They came inside, sat at the kitchen table, and Marcus slid a file folder across the wood. "We need to get a handle on the estate," he said. "The property needs to be liquidated for the benefit of the heirs." I told them about the life estate. Renee smiled, that tight, condescending smile that never reached her eyes. "Dana, Dad was old. He didn't understand the legal realities. We have a responsibility to modernize his affairs. Marcus does commercial real estate." Marcus nodded. "We have a developer ready to make an all-cash offer, $745,000, no contingencies. We need you to cooperate." I told them I'd think about it. That was the first time I saw the flicker, the tiny flash of anger behind Renee's buttocks. They wanted me to be the dumb, exhausted caregiver who would just sign whatever they put in front of her. The next morning, they started packing up the house. Renee went through my father's workshop, throwing things into black contractor bags. Old plans, letters, photographs, tools, union pins, sketches, receipts, all the physical evidence of his life. She was angry, aggressive, filling bag after bag with the history of a man she had ignored for 2 decades. She had a roll of heavy-duty contractor bags and a Bluetooth earpiece in her ear, so she could narrate her own efficiency to someone on the other end. "This junk is worthless," she said, kicking a small wooden box with her designer heel. "It's all going to the dump." The box slid across the floor and hit the baseboard. I watched it. It was a small, unassuming thing made of cedar with a hinged lid and a worn brass clasp. I remembered my father keeping it on the top shelf of his closet. I had never opened it. I didn't even know what was inside. Renee picked it up, opened the lid, peeked in, and sneered. "Rotten." She tossed it toward the door. It landed in a pile of rags. A few hours later, when Marcus finally let me have a moment alone to use the bathroom, I went back. I found the box in the pile, stuffed it under my jacket, and carried it out to my car. I didn't feel sad. I felt watchful. I was starting to understand the game. That night in my tiny apartment across town, I opened the box at my kitchen table, careful not to spill the contents onto the floor. It was filled with old keys, a few coins, some fishing lures with dulled hooks, a pocket knife with a patina of rust, and a folded piece of sandpaper that still smelled like sawdust. At the bottom, there was a stack of folded papers, yellowed at the edges. I pulled them out. They were property records, mortgage satisfactions, and a single legal document titled trustee deed. I frowned. A trustee deed wasn't a normal part of a will. There was no trust mentioned in my father's will. I unfolded the last piece of paper. It was a note in my father's careful carpenter's block lettering. It said, "Do not trust them. Save yourself." Below that, there was a phone number for a county records office, and below that, a tiny drawing of a hinge with an arrow pointing to the pin. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you believe family should be measured by loyalty, not by greed, because what I found next was the first layer of the trap. The next day, Renee and Marcus sat me down again. They had a stack of documents, a notary stamp, and a check for $4,600. The check was already printed, already dated, and already placed in a pale blue envelope with my name misspelled on the front. It was made out to Dana M. Holloway, not Holloway. A small, deliberate mistake. They wanted me to feel like an afterthought. "This is for your moving expenses," Renee said, her voice syrupy sweet. "We found you a lovely assisted living facility." Assisted living? I was 53 years old. I had no major health problems, no cognitive decline, no mobility issues. I had spent my entire adult life taking care of my father, and they were trying to put me in a home to get me out of the way. Marcus pushed a pen across the table. "This is the power of attorney assignment," he said. "And this is the deed transfer. It extinguishes your life estate interest and transfers title to the trustee, who can then execute a sale on behalf of the estate." I looked at the papers. I didn't understand all the legalese, but I understood the $4,600. That was the price of my home. I looked up at them. I made my face go slack. I let my eyes water. I slumped my shoulders and let my voice go thin and wavery. "I'm so tired," I whispered. "I've been so foggy since Dad died, I just need to rest. Can we do this tomorrow?" Marcus's jaw tensed. A vein in his temple pulsed once. Renee squeezed my hand too hard, her fingernails digging into my palm. "Of course, sweetie, tomorrow." They left the documents on the coffee table. That night after they returned to their hotel, I photographed every single page with my phone, front and back, including the sticky notes in Marcus's handwriting that listed the exact filing deadlines. I emailed the photographs to 3 separate cloud accounts. I did not sign anything. The next morning, they moved me into their guest bedroom. It was part of the control tactic. If I was in their house, I was under their roof, disoriented, dependent. They framed it as helping me get back on my feet and keeping me safe from the stress of the estate. I knew what it really was. They wanted to isolate me from the cottage, from my neighbors, from the county records office, from any lawyer I might hire on my own. They wanted me in a room with white carpet and no sharp objects. I packed a small bag, pretended to be overwhelmed with grief, and let them drive me to a sterile, echoey McMansion in a cul-de-sac where every lawn was chemically identical. The guest room had white carpet, white walls, a bed that was too soft, and a window that looked out onto the neighbor's decorative rock garden. There was a lock on the outside of the door. It was not a standard guest room lock. It was a small brass barrel bolt, installed at ankle height, like the kind you see on a child's bedroom door to keep a toddler from wandering. I noticed it immediately. I did not mention it. That was the first time I realized they were not just manipulating me, they were preparing to confine me. But I had spent 24 years running a household on $2,000 a month. I knew how to listen. I knew how to watch. I knew how to read the subtle signs of a person who is lying about money. Renee and Marcus were not as clever as they thought. The first red flag was a phone call I overheard at 2 in the morning. I was lying awake, staring at the ceiling, and I heard Marcus in his home office pacing back and forth on the hardwood floor. His voice was low, but the walls were thin. "I understand the note is due. I understand. We are restructuring. The property will be sold by the end of the month. Yes, cash, $745,000. No, the life estate is not an issue. It's being extinguished. The trustee deed is being recorded. Yes, I have the paperwork." I heard a glass shatter. He was throwing things, then another crash, then the sound of his fist hitting the wall. That was the first crack. A man who is about to receive $745,000 in cash does not throw a glass at a wall at 2 in the morning. A man who is about to receive a windfall sleeps soundly. The second red flag was the spending. Renee came home with a new handbag the next day. Real leather, the kind that costs more than my monthly rent. Then a new flat-screen television for the kitchen. Then a deposit was made on a luxury vacation to St. Bart's, all of it before any sale had closed. They had jobs, technically, but not the kind of jobs that fund St. Bart's vacations. Renee was a regional marketing manager for a mid-sized skincare company. Marcus was a mid-level commercial real estate broker at a firm that had not closed a major deal in 18 months. They were living like hedge fund managers, and it was all debt. Their entire illusion was held together with credit cards and a balloon loan that was about to pop. I started keeping a mental ledger of every new purchase, every delivery box, every restaurant receipt I saw in the kitchen trash. 2 weeks into my little guest room incarceration, Marcus's office printer broke. It was a massive, multi-function machine, one of those beige commercial models that weighs 40 pounds and has a touchscreen menu that always fails. It started spitting out error codes and jammed paper. Marcus was panicking. He had a call with a client in 20 minutes and needed to scan a document. Renee was useless. "Just call the service guy," she said, not looking up from her phone. "It'll take hours," he snapped. The service contract expired. I walked into the office, looked at the machine, and said, "I can take a look." He looked at me like I was a stray cat that had wandered in from the lake. I opened the side panel, found the jammed roller, and saw a scrap of paper wedged against the feed mechanism. It was a bank statement. I didn't read it, not yet. I reached in, pulled out the wrinkled paper, and held it up. "Is this yours?" I asked, my voice innocent. Marcus snatched it from my hand. "No, junk mail." I could see the logo on the corner. It was a private bank, not a regular bank. A private bank for wealthy clients. The kind of bank that sends statements in thick cream envelopes with a copper-embossed logo. I fixed the printer by reseating the toner cartridge, clearing the error code, and resetting the maintenance counter. It took me 4 minutes. Marcus stared at me. "How did you know how to do that?" "I fixed the printer at my father's doctor's office for 15 years, I said. "They couldn't afford a service contract." That was the moment I saw it. A flicker of something like fear or maybe recognition. He was realizing that I was not the helpless, foggy woman he had boxed in. I was competent. Competence is dangerous to people like him. The real break came during a dinner party. They had invited a few of their neighbors over, people with fake smiles and fake jewelry, all drinking Chardonnay and talking about their vacation homes. I was the quiet, grieving sister-in-law in the corner, sipping water, listening. Marcus had a few drinks. He got louder. He started telling a story about a property deal in the mountains, and he mentioned something about the title seasoning period. I knew that phrase, title seasoning. It's a fraud prevention measure where a lender requires a property to be owned for a certain period before a new refinance can be approved. It prevents fraudulent flips and straw buyer scams. Why would a man selling a house to a developer care about title seasoning? He was planning something else. He was using the cottage as collateral for a new loan, not selling it. Using it. The developer was a cover story, or maybe the developer was the initial buyer and Marcus planned to flip it again, or maybe the developer was a shell. Either way, the word seasoning told me he was working a lender, not a buyer. That night, after the guests left, I waited until the house went dark and quiet. Then I moved through the upstairs hallway in socked feet, careful to avoid the floorboards that creaked. I had mapped them over the previous days, noting exactly which boards groaned under weight and which ones were silent. I found the door to Marcus's home office unlocked, but the filing cabinet inside was not. It was a 2-drawer steel cabinet, the kind you can buy at any office supply store, with a cheap wafer lock that a child could defeat. But I did not want to leave scratches. My father had been a locksmith as a side trade, back before the economy crashed. He taught me how to pick a lock when I was 19, because he wanted me to be able to get back into the house if I ever locked myself out. He gave me a small kit with a tension wrench and a rake. But that kit was still at my apartment, and I was not allowed to leave the house alone. So I improvised. I made a tension wrench from the metal spine of an old windshield wiper blade that I found in the garage. I used the metal strip from a flimsy produced tie as a rake, bending the tip with a pair of needle-nose pliers that Renee kept in the junk drawer. I worked the lock by feel, applying gentle clockwise torque and dragging the rake across the pins. Wafer locks are simple. They have flat tumblers instead of cylindrical pins, and they bind in sequence. You apply tension, feel the first wafer catch, then the second, then the third. It took me 11 seconds to open that filing cabinet. 11 seconds to crack what was protecting their entire financial life. Inside, I found a stack of documents that made my stomach drop. There was a forged signature on a satisfaction of mortgage form. The signature was supposed to be my father's, but I had watched him sign thousands of documents in his final years. His hand was shaky, but his R was always distinctive, a backwards loop, a habit from his cursive lessons in grade school. The signature on this form was too smooth. It was a traced copy, done by someone with a steady hand and no arthritis. There was also a loan application in my name. My name, Dana Marie Holloway. The application was for a $100,000 unsecured business loan, using the cottage as a partial collateral reference. The signature was a disastrous copy of mine. I don't dot my IS. This one had perfect dotted IS. It was amateur. But banks don't check that closely if the documents are notarized by a cooperative notary. The notary stamp on the document belonged to Marcus's assistant at his real estate firm. I photographed every page, making sure the dates, the account numbers, and the notary block were all legible. Then I found the title report. Marcus had hired a third-party title abstractor to do a preliminary search on the cottage. The report was clean. Clean because someone had pulled strings to remove the recorded life estate from the public index. They had filed a fraudulent satisfaction, claiming that the life estate had been terminated by mutual agreement. It hadn't. I had never agreed to anything. The satisfaction was a fake, notarized by Marcus's assistant and filed with the county recorder. This was not just greed. This was identity fraud, forgery, and real estate fraud on a massive scale. Then I found the trust agreement. The cottage had been transferred into a trust I had never heard of. The trustee was Marcus. The beneficiary was Renee. The remainder beneficiary was listed as the Holloway Family Revocable Trust, which was a legal fiction. I was not named anywhere. They had created a false ownership structure, used a forged satisfaction to extinguish my life estate, and were now preparing to either sell the cottage or use it as collateral for more debt. And I had the evidence to prove all of it. But evidence is only as good as the authority who will act on it. And that is where the quiet countermeasure came in, the ally in the machine. My father had seen this coming. I was convinced of it now. That note, "Do not trust them. Save yourself," was not paranoid rambling. He had already suspected. He had already prepared. The "keep the hinges oiled" comment was not about the physical hinges on the cottage door. It was about the hinge of the law. The oil was the truth, recorded, notarized, and he had kept it oiled for years. I went back to the box. I looked at the documents inside more carefully. There was an original recorded copy of the life estate, with an official recording stamp and a ledger number. There was a second document, a handwritten amendment in my father's careful script, witnessed and notarized, stating that any termination of the life estate must be approved in person by Dana Holloway, with a thumbprint and a commissioned witness, and filed by the county recorder, not by a private trustee. No mailed notarizations. No convenience signatures. No electronic signatures. My father had created a dead man's switch. The life estate could not be legally extinguished unless I, and only I, appeared in person at the county recorder's office and executed a termination affidavit with my own thumbprint. Any attempt to terminate it through a surrogate was a felony. The forged satisfaction they filed was not just a lie. It was legally void. It was a cloud on the title, but it could be scrubbed away. The cleanup would take legal action, but the trap was set. They had fallen into it. I needed confirmation. I needed an authority who could move. I made the call from the bathroom, with the shower running to mask my voice. I contacted the county recorder's office. I spoke to a woman named Carol, a deputy recorder with a smoker's cough and a no-nonsense tone. She pulled the original record. She confirmed that the original life estate was still valid. She explained that the satisfaction filed 3 weeks ago had a notary stamp that didn't match the official seal on file for that notary. It was a fake stamp. Marcus's assistant had used a novelty stamp she bought online for $11. Carol's voice got very quiet. "Ms. Holloway," she said, "I have been doing this for 30 years. I have never seen a satisfaction this sloppy. This is not a clerical error. This is fraud." She directed me to a lawyer, a pit bull of a woman named Elaine, who specialized in elder financial abuse and real estate fraud. Elaine took one look at my photographs and my father's handwritten amendment, and she smiled, a predator's smile. "Dana," she said, "they didn't just try to steal your house, they tried to erase you, and they made it so easy to prove." She explained the next step. We would file a lis pendens, a notice that the property was subject to litigation, which would freeze the sale and put every buyer and lender on notice. We would also file a criminal complaint with the county district attorney's office, because forgery and notary fraud are felonies. And we would request a court-ordered forensic accounting of the estate's financial records, because Marcus had used a forged trust document to secure a private loan, and that was wire fraud. The FBI would be interested. Elaine said, "Don't tell them anything. Let them keep moving. Every transfer they make, every document they sign, every dollar they spend, it's another count in the indictment." But I needed to know if they still had a shred of humanity, so I staged the test. One afternoon, I was in the kitchen, drinking a glass of water. I had bought a small bottle of over-the-counter syrup at the pharmacy, the kind that makes you feel a bit lightheaded if you take too much. I am careful. I know my body. I took a small dose, enough to make me look pale and unsteady. I walked into the living room, where Renee and Marcus were finalizing the sale contract with a local realtor. The realtor was a nervous woman in a navy blazer who kept checking her watch. The papers were spread across the coffee table in neat stacks. I stopped. I grabbed the back of a chair. "I feel dizzy," I said, my voice weak. "I think something is wrong." I let myself slide to the floor. I crumpled, my body going limp, my head tilted to one side. I was conscious. I was watching. Renee looked at me. She looked at the papers on the table. She looked at the realtor. Then she stepped over my legs. She stepped over me. She did not kneel. She did not check my pulse. She did not call 911. She did not even pause. She stepped over my body, walked to the table, picked up a specific document, and handed it to Marcus. "This is the one we need," she said. "The rest can wait." She glanced down at me. "She'll come around, she always does." Marcus nodded, barely glancing at me. "Let's get this locked in before the deadline." They went back to their paperwork. I lay there on the cold tile floor, staring at the ceiling, and I felt the final strand of family loyalty snap. It was not a loud break. It was a quiet, surgical severing. I was done. They had shown me who they were. I believed them. 3 days later, Marcus drove me to the county title office. He said we needed to finalize the paperwork for the sale. He was practically vibrating with anxiety. The developer's money was waiting in escrow. The private lender was waiting for their payoff. The house of cards was about to collapse, and he needed the life estate officially extinguished. He had brought a fresh set of documents, including a power of attorney that would let him sign on my behalf. He pulled into the parking lot. Renee was already inside, waiting with a notary they had brought from their real estate office. The realtor was there too. They had set the stage. I walked in, my face blank, my shoulders slumped. The notary was a nervous young woman with a shaky smile. She had a stamp. She had a logbook. Marcus slid the termination affidavit across the table. "This is the final step," he said. "Sign here, initial here, and we're done. You'll be free. We'll take care of everything." I looked at the document. It was a simple form. It claimed that I was voluntarily terminating my life estate interest in exchange for a financial settlement. The settlement was listed as the $4,600 check. I looked up at Marcus. I looked at Renee. Then I looked at the door. A man in a gray suit was standing there, watching. He had a badge on his belt. Another man was with him, a woman in a blazer. They were from the county district attorney's office and the FBI's white-collar division. I turned back to Marcus. I put my hands flat on the table. I did not raise my voice. I said the one line I had been practicing in the mirror for 2 weeks. I have spent 24 years honoring this family. I will not spend one more second being erased by it. Marcus stared at me. What are you talking about? Just sign the damn paper. I shook my head. I am not signing anything, and neither are you. The agent stepped forward. The DA's investigator said, Marcus Holloway, Renee Holloway, you are under arrest for forgery, grand theft, identity fraud, and wire fraud. The courtroom scene was not dramatic. It was methodical. The evidence was overwhelming. The forged satisfaction, the fake notary stamp, the fraudulent trust, the wire transfers. Marcus tried to claim it was a misunderstanding. Renee started crying, then screaming, then threatening. It did not matter. The judge denied bail based on flight risk. The civil lawsuit froze the cottage. The lis pendens killed the sale. The developer backed out. The private lender went after Marcus's personal assets. The house in the cul-de-sac, the cars, the bank accounts, the St. Bart's vacation fund, all seized, all liquidated. Renee and Marcus were convicted. He was sentenced to 7 years and 4 months in a federal correctional institution. She was sentenced to 5 years and 2 months. They are both in federal prison now. Their marriage dissolved, and the divorce was bitter and public. Their associates, the notary, the assistant, the realtor, they all flipped. The assistant testified that Marcus had instructed her to buy a fake notary stamp online and practice forging signatures. The notary admitted she had not checked identification because Marcus paid her in cash. The restitution order was massive, enough to cover every legal fee and every fraudulent transfer. The best part, the deeply satisfying part, was not the prison sentence. It was the fact that they had sold the cottage to a developer for $745,000, but the fraudulent satisfaction voided that sale. The cottage reverted to me. I received the life estate back. Then, because of the criminal convictions and the civil judgment, I was also awarded the remainder interest in the property. I became the full owner, not through a violent windfall, but because the court determined that Renee and Marcus had abused their position and forfeited their inheritance rights. The cottage was mine, not just for my life. Mine. The money from the civil judgment was substantial. Not enough to be stupid, but enough to repair the dock, replace the roof, repaint the trim, and build 6 small guest cabins. I turned the cottage into a small fishing retreat. 6 cabins, a bait shop, a boat rental. I called it the Reel of Deceit Fishing Retreat. The name makes some people laugh. They think it's a clever wordplay. They don't know the half of it. I framed the original county docket sheet from the fraud case and hung it in the bait shop, right next to the map of the lake and a hand-painted sign that says, "All fish stories must be true." Every receipt, every invoice, every reservation confirmation, it prints the deed fraud docket number at the bottom. It is a small reminder, not for me, for her. Renee got out early. Good behavior, a prison workforce program, a sympathetic parole board. She was released 4 years into her sentence. She called me from a halfway house. She said she had changed. She said she wanted to make amends. She asked for a job. I thought about it for a long time. I thought about the tile floor, the papers, the step over my legs. I thought about my father's note. Then I agreed, not out of forgiveness, out of clarity. I told her the terms. She would live in the staff bunkhouse, not the main house. She would work the boat rental desk. She would scrub the rowboats every morning. She would wear the waiters I provided. She would not handle money. She would not have access to any keys except the mop closet. She would be watched by a retired probation officer I hired, a man named Bill who used to run a work crew in the same federal system. Every morning, at first light, Renee wades into the shallow water by the dock, holding a scrub brush. The waders I gave her are heavy rubber. They fit too tight in the shoulders. Across the back in bright orange letters are the words "Hooked my inheritance." Tourists ask her about them. She has to smile and say it's a family joke. It is not a joke. It is a receipt. My father was a brilliant man. He knew that the law is a hinge. It swings on precision. A forged signature is not just a lie. It is a bearing that will fail under weight. A fake notary stamp is not just a prop. It is a fracture waiting to break. He left me the oil for the hinge. He left me the evidence. He left me the warning. Do not trust them. Save yourself. I did not need to fight them. I just needed to let the hinge swing shut, and when it did, it crushed them. I look out at the lake every morning, watch the sun hit the water, and I think about that little cedar box. It was not worthless junk. It was a dead man's switch, a quiet, brilliant countermeasure. I learned that integrity is not a loud thing. It is a locked cabinet, a shaky signature, a note written in careful block letters. And family is not a right. It is a contract. They broke it. The law enforced it. Have you ever discovered a dark secret about someone you trusted completely? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments. If you believe that a forged signature can never truly erase a loyal daughter, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about the quiet, brutal mechanics of justice. Until next time, keep your papers dry and your friends closer than your relatives.